Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of YouTube's Scale Modeling channel. Today we're going to start a series on building Monogram's 1/48 scale C-47. Just a little bit of history. This is one of the first large-scale 1/48 scale aircraft that were produced by any manufacturer, and Monogram introduced it in 1978. And you know what? It's still a great kit. Back in the early 90s, they modified the molds so that it looked like an old DC-3 airliner. So we're going to start with episode 1, which is to work on the interior and modify the wings and the tail. And along the way, we're going to do some fit checks before we go to the next step. So let's get started. I've got some of the interior bulkheads in place, and they came out pretty good. It's really important to make sure that you have the decking set correctly here. And let me see if I can show you how I did that. There are 2 tabs which come off the bottom of the deck, and they sit on this lower protruding tab on the starboard, or on the starboard side of the fuselage. And then there's a tab here, and then there are 2 tabs here, and then one back here, and they all sit on the bottom of this deck. And as you can see, the deck is bowed just a little bit up, which is fine. Once I close up the fuselage, you're really not going to see that. So what I did was I pulled the deck out, and one by one I glued these bulkheads in place with a little bit of Tester's red tube glue on the underside, and then slipped the decking in place, positioned it properly, and then made sure that each bulkhead was straight. I let it dry, and then I hit it with some super glue. So that's how I did the bulkheads. How I did the deck, you can actually do the deck from the outside. And this kit generally doesn't have very good positioning tabs. I don't know why Monogram did this, but be that as it may, these individual deck sections here fit on these tabs that are angled, and they're supposed to touch the deck. So what I did was I used super glue and pushed down with my thumb, and then ran a bead of super glue on the backside here and kind of worked my way down to make sure that it was tight. And then once that was done, I hit these tabs with some super glue. So I did that on both sides. I also glued the wash sink bulkhead here. There are 2 bulkheads forward, and this one has a table which sits just like this. It sits off the deck. That's how Monogram designed it. And then this bulkhead here has got this piece and this piece. And I glued this piece in place with some Tester's red tube glue, let it set. This allowed me to position it properly, and then I hit it with some super glue to make it nice and strong. So this piece goes right here. Whoops. Like I said, the positioning tabs are not very good on this kit. So this piece goes here, and this piece goes on the other side and sits right here. Now again, looking through the cockpit glass, which is very small on a DC-3, you're not going to see very much. But I did outline where these bulkheads go so I can run a little bit of tiny strips of masking tape here so that when I airbrush this interior that I won't have to scrape any of that paint off. And then the cockpit, again, there's hardly any, like there's no positioning tabs for the seat. You just kind of sit them on these angles here, and it's just really strange how they did this. But I think it'll build up into a good kit. But let me show you something else. If you want to have this door closed, it doesn't fit very well. as best as you're going to get it right here. It doesn't fit very well along these edges. So what I'm going to do is cut it right here, and I'll cut out the hinges, and then I'm going to position the doors, both doors, open just a little bit. And that'll allow you to kind of peek inside, but not see too much. The other thing is there are some mole punch outs here and here, and you need to sand these down so that this long section of clear glass will sit correctly inside of the squares. And the same thing here. So that's what I've done so far on the interior. And what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and tape up the fuselage and check the fit of these two clear parts here, the cockpit glass and also the Astrodome glass. So I've got a picture of a DC-3 interior from an air museum, and you can see it's just really, really tight in this cockpit. So I'll get back to you as soon as I get this taped up, and we'll take a look at it. I've got the fuselage taped up, and I have the interior decking and the main bulkheads, of course, glued in place just to check the fit. And there's no interference issues, so I think we're in pretty good shape. The fit is good along the upper area. My tape is coming undone here. And on the bottom side too, looks pretty good. So I think we're going to be in good shape. I did notice I've got some dimples here, here, and here I need to fix, and got a slight misalignment problem here, but I think once the glass is in place you're not going to notice that. And I'm going to have to be real careful when I glue this so I don't misalign this escape hatch at the top of the cockpit. So other than that, I think we're in good shape. And there's a hatch down here, right there, that I'm going to have to be careful about. I don't want to either misalign that or mar that detail. So I'm going to lose a little bit of the detail along the top here, the recessed panel line, or the raised panel lines. And again, just like I explained to you on the B-17 build, the DC-3, and I'll have some surface pictures of it as I move along here in my videos. The DC-3 had all lap joints and very pronounced rivets. So, of course, Monogram got all of the lap joint locations fairly correct, but of course there's no rivets on here. So that concludes my remarks and checks on the fuselage, and I think we're ready to start working on the interior areas and button up the fuselage. I've got the wings taped up to check the fit of this piece on the bottom of the fuselage, and after I do that, I'll go ahead and take all this tape off and show you the modifications I made. One thing I noted was I did put some reinforcing on the inside here, but when you glue this down, you see you've got a little bit of play here. Let me see here. See that? Right there. And there's a lip on the inside of here, and if you run a bead of super glue along here and hold it down, it really helps make the wing a lot stronger. And like I said, I put some reinforcing on the inside here. And I also checked the fit of the wing glass and for the lights, and it fits very well. And I'll show you how I did these when I closed up these openings. Otherwise there just would have been a hole there. But let's go ahead and check the fit of this. Let me move these around here and see how it looks. This slips into here, and this goes up here. So you're going to have some tweaks. There we go. Right here, you're going to have to do some sanding, and you're going to lose some of this detail. Back here, you've got a gap, and you can fill that gap with some plastic strip. Now on the top side, again, you've got a gap, a slight gap here that you can just fill with super glue. This side has got a little bit more of a gap. I think you can get some glue in here. I don't even think you can get 5/1000ths in here. But once we get it glued together, we'll take a look at it. But fit's not that bad. And it's a fairly good sized model. The wingspan is comparable to the B-17 build I did. And it's going to look nice when it's done. It is an impressive Goonie bird. So let's go ahead and take the wings apart, and I'll get back to you in a minute and show you the modifications I made to the wings. Okay, I've got the tape off, and before I open up the wing and show you how I did this, I assembled the wing spar, and the fit's not all that great, but what I did was I pressed down on this piece here and making sure that it was sitting up against this tab right here at the center, and ran a bead of super glue and kind of worked my way across. These tabs in the back on the with the openings for the landing gear, they don't fit up against this correctly. If this is positioned correctly, you've got a gap here, so just be aware of that. And it's really important for this to be vertical from the inside here. Otherwise, it's going to be at an angle and it's going to look funny. So the other thing is that this spar can be glued in place, and then the wings glued together and then just kind of slipped into place here. So that's a deviation from the instructions, but it works really, really well, and that'll work really good. So with that said, here's what I did to the interior. We'll go ahead and open this up. This is how I reinforced it. Now, on this side, I did it this way. On this wing, I did it the opposite way, where I just ran long strips here, and either way will work really, really well. What you want to do, the plastic is really thin, so you don't want it to flex while you're working on the seams. So that's why I did this. And I do this on all my kits, just to reinforce it and make it strong. The other thing I did was I added the wing light openings, and I made a box real easily with I used my Waldron punch here and to make the circular ones. And the fit is not great, but once it's closed up, it's going to look pretty good. And the cockpit, this glass that sits over this will kind of obscure the disparity in the openings on both sides. And then the wing spars I had cut it off here. I've got a nice light, that the landing light that is molded onto the end of this, and I cut it off. And what I'm going to do is cut it out, and once I get all of this done and paint it up, I'll go ahead and glue that landing light in place, and it'll look pretty good. So the fit of these wing sections to the main wing, which attaches to the fuselage, is actually pretty good. This piece here, this is a reinforcer for the wing, and it's actually here on the actual airplane, and I think I've got a picture of that I'll kind of splice in here to show you. But all these reinforcers are accurate, and again, on the DC-3, there were very few butt joints. It was mostly all lap jointed, and Monogram accurately represented where all of the lap joints are on this aircraft. So for all of you people who think that every aircraft should have engraved panel lines, these panel lines, these petite raised panel lines, accurately represent the lap joint sheets on both the fuselage and the wing. So these are the modifications that I made, and I did make one more modification to the inside here. So when I talk about the landing gear, I'll show you what I did. I've got the cockpit glass and the astrodome glass taped into place, and the cockpit glass fits remarkably well in place. I'm going to just tweak it just a little bit to get these sides to fit better on the opening of the fuselage. But overall, looks pretty good. On this side, on the port side, you've got a little bit of a gap here, and I think I can close that up by sanding that down. You see there's a little bit of a peak there on that edge. If I sand that down, it'll probably seat this correctly, like that, right there. See that? So there just leaves us a little bit of a gap right here. The other thing is the sharp nose protrudes out just a little bit, but I think that can be fixed by pushing it in. And what I'm going to do is when I airbrush the framing, I'll paint the inside of the edges here, top and bottom, so that I can hold this in place with some white glue. But looks pretty good. The astrodome fits okay, but once the fuselage is glued together and closed up, I'm going to have to do a little bit of sculpturing here and here to get this to sit down inside of the opening like it's supposed to. But other than that, I'm pleasantly surprised. It fits fairly well together. Any of these gaps, I'll just fill them with white glue and it'll look pretty good. I've got the fuselage glass installed, and the fit is really, really good. Now, you need to make sure that there's a difference between the port and starboard glasses, and you need to make sure this opening is a little bit bigger than the rest of these. So when you check the fit, be sure that you position them correctly. But both sides look really good. A little bit of distortion in the clear glass, but once it's all painted up, it'll look pretty good. And we are in pretty good shape. Now, when I glue these, I will put tape here, all in these areas between the glass before I airbrush. And then after I'm done, I'll remove the tape and I'll put a tiny drop of tester's glue on each one of these so that it's really strong. Because after you put the fuselage together, if this pops out, you can't get in there and fix it. So you need to make sure that when you glue these, you do it in such a way that it's very strong, because you're going to be putting a lot of masking on these pieces of glass here before you airbrush the outside. So with that said, we're ready to move on. As per the instructions, I cut the paratrooper door open, and I'm going to have it so that it's just slightly open like this on the side of the fuselage. And then I used a razor saw to carefully cut it, and then cleaned it up with a sanding stick and a sharp edge of a number 11 X-Acto blade, and it came out pretty good, both sides. Then what I did was I cut the hinges at the slightly indented lines. Now on this one, it's the outer indentation that you cut on. Instructions are not real clear about that, but it's the outer indentation. And then what I did was I took each door separately and taped it into place. And then I put a tiny drop of tester's glue on the side of the fuselage and then put each hinge in place. And that allowed me to position them with a pair of tweezers. And I did the same thing. I used that same process on this side, where I taped it in place, and you can see the hinges line up fairly well. So then when when I have it in the open position, it'll be like this. So, and then I ran a bead of super glue around the edge, and then I had to scrape it down because I used a little too much super glue, and scraped it down here, and I kind of marred it a little bit. So here's how you fix that. You take a little bit of this very, very fine wool, steel wool, and you make it into a ball. And then what you do is very, very carefully smooth out the plastic with the ball. Just like that. You reset the ball. Just want to make sure that the tips of the tweezers are far enough away from the surface. Otherwise, you're going to scrape the plastic. There you go. Perfecto mundo. Need to do a little bit more here. Doesn't take a lot of pressure. Let the wool, the fine steel wool, do the work. And then when you're done, what you want to do is you're going to have steel wool dust here and steel wool dust on the surface of the model. And what I usually do is I'll run this underwater, some running water, and a little bit of mild soap and a toothbrush, and get all that off. So that is a problem with using these steel wool pads. You get a lot of that steel wool dust on the surface, and so you've got to take care to go ahead and clean all this up. Otherwise, when you start painting, you're going to see all these fine fibers in your paint surface. So that's how you clean that up, and I hope this was helpful. The other thing is that there were some additional injection pin marks that I sanded down, and I'll take the steel wool and just sand them, steel wool this smooth like this. Big difference. And then again, it leaves a lot of this fiber. So I did it here, so I'll go ahead and clean it up here. I did it down here. Had some, these were interfering with the flight deck, or the decking rather, not the flight deck, the decking, and another one here that I scraped down. Okay, they're nice and smooth. And one more up here. And it's nice and smooth. So now I just got to clean up all of this, and we're set. So that's how you use a steel wool pad. And again, it makes a mess, but it's well worth it. You just have to be diligent and careful about how you clean it up. What I usually do is I'll put some paper towel down, do all this fine steel wool work, and throw this out. You can see this is ready to be thrown out. I'll do the fine steel wool work, and then I just wrap up the paper towel and throw that in the garbage. So we are ready to move on. But yeah, these all need to be cleaned up. The fit of the horizontal stabilizers and the elevators, which of course are one piece, which is standard for monogram kit, fit pretty good. Now how I glued this together was I used the tester's glue, red tube glue, and just put a tiny drop on the positioning tabs, closed it up, and held it in place for about 30 seconds, and closed up really, really well. And there's no gap at all on either one of these. Now on this one, I sealed the seam line with a fine bead of super glue, and now all I got to do is sand it and scrape it, and we'll be in good shape. Now to maintain the roundness of this edge here on the leading edge, once I to do the finishing work, I'll use a flexifile and be able to restore that round appearance of the leading edge. But yeah, looking pretty good. And the fit of these onto the fuselage is okay. They fit like that inside the fuselage to give it a little bit of strength. And I think this will be okay. I may have to tweak these a little bit to get a tighter fit, but I think we're in good shape. I've got both horizontal stabilizers complete, and again, using my technique of that I showed you of running a bead of super glue along here. And these, I use some tester's glue to glue the inside areas together, and then taped it, and then ran a bead of super glue around here, pulled the tape off, and did the rest of it. And it's been sanded and scraped, and it looks pretty good. And I just need to run a flexifile across this front here, fix some of these tiny flat areas on both of these, and these are done. The other thing is that when I tested the wings, because they go inside the fuselage this way, these were slightly too long, so I cut them down, and now I've got a real tight fit on both sides. So I'm really pleased with the way they came out. So once I get these glued to the fuselage sides, I'll show you how that looks. But it's looking pretty good. And then of course once I'm done, I'll clean up all of this silver paint with a Q-tip dipped in some enamel thinner. I've got the horizontal stabilizers glued in place, and they came out pretty good. Unfortunately, this petite raised panel line detail that runs this way, I had to sand it all off because of the misalignment of the part onto the fuselage. But it's all been sanded smooth. Once it's painted, it'll look good. What was important was getting all of this seam work here done so that it was smoothed out, and that took a little work. And then contour the leading edge onto the leading edge of the attachment point on the fuselage. So I did that on both wings, on both fuselage sides. And it came out pretty good. A few other things. I had cut the, I think I had mentioned that I had cut the doors and installed the hinge sides. And here I'm getting ready to go ahead and airbrush the interiors with a primer. So I did attach this tiny part here, and on the inside of the fuselage, the rear landing gear cup. This is the landing gears on these were non-retractable in the rear. And then there's an overhead console that goes here. There's really no position alignment pins on it. There's just this tiny raised box right in this area here. So what I did was I used some tester's glue, put it in place, and then got it positioned as best I could. And once it dried, then I hit it with some super glue to hold it in place. The other thing I've done here is I've got tape where I don't want any paint to get on, because these are attachment points for the glass and for the interior deck. So I think that's about it. Oh, one more thing. These interior positioning tabs were slightly too long on this side, so I went ahead and cut them, so now the fuselage halves fit together very well. So I think we're ready to have all the parts put down on foam board, taped to foam board, and then I'm going to go ahead and prime all the areas and all the parts, and we'll see how that looks. So I'm going to use the zinc chromate color, not zinc chromate green, the yellowish zinc chromate color for this one. It's probably not 100% accurate, but I wanted to, since this is going to be pretty much a closed-up fuselage, I wanted to lighten up the interior as much as possible. So it'll look pretty good when it's done. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed part 1, and stay tuned for part 2, where we start doing some modifications to the engine nacelles to accept 3D printed engines and modifications to the landing gear. With that, have a great evening, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and if you get the chance, visit our website at www.mikeesche.com, where you're going to find dozens and dozens of reference aircraft photography. Have a great evening.